Hundreds of Nigerians are stuck at the Sudanese-Egyptian border. They were set to return home today, but have been prevented from crossing into freedom and safety by the Egyptian authorities, who are, well, reportedly demanding transit visas. Let's bring in retired career diplomat Ambassador Frank Isoh. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight tonight. Well, in our headline, we actually talked about the possibility of diplomatic, crisis brewing here between Nigeria and, of course, Sudan. What do you make of all that's going on, Nigeria's preparation to evacuating the Nigerian students? The crisis there, they're stranded. We're told there are no supplies for them. What do you make of all of this going on there?
Well, I think... Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and good evening, viewers. This situation is a very complex one. For those who are not actively involved, in trying to resolve the matter, it's difficult for them to understand why this kind of situation should exist. But for those officers who are closely involved, it's a very complex situation, and I can imagine the tension they are going through, trying to make sure things work out. And I can equally understand, the pressure Nigerians are putting on them, given their justified concern, for the welfare and well-being of their compatriots out there. Now, the Nigerian government did its best, if I am to say that, because given the circumstances, nobody would have expected the government to just rush in and start evacuating its citizens when bullets are flying all around the place. So they needed to have the concurrence of the warring factions in Sudan, the army, and the rapid support forces. And when that happened, they were able to start the evacuation. Now, I grant, that the plan was shortly, and that's understandable. So given the short window, they had to do all these things. It was inevitable, that mistakes, will happen. But all in all, I think I'll give them a good pass mark for what they've done so far. Now, the problem they are facing at the Egyptian border, I think is beyond everybody's control. I think the Egyptians are wrong, to think that transit visa will be needed but for people, who are running away from a war situation. These are quasi-refugees, and under international law, all countries are bound, to give refuge to such people. And secondly, too, being an organized arrangement, it's easy, to monitor their movement all the way from the border, to the airport. So that's what I believe the Egyptians should have done, So the idea of trying to create this problem, is not helpful, in interstate relations. Unfortunately, it's not only Nigeria, that's involved. So many other nations are affected. But I do hope, listening to Nigerian officials that hopefully by tomorrow morning, all this will be very well addressed.
Let me comment here, Ambassador. One of the key concerns will be the kind of relationship between Nigeria and Egypt. When it took that route, one would have expected that there is some kind of conversation between Egypt and Nigeria. And under the same rule of non-refoulement, these are technically refugees running from well-founded fear in Sudan. Speak to us more on what our country, Nigeria, should have done before getting to that point of entry.
Yes, you are very correct. Part of the arrangement should have included discussing with the Egyptian officers if visas would be needed. And if they were told that visas would be needed, I think the difficulty of getting those visas should have been made clear to the Egyptians. I doubt if any embassy is operating in Khartoum to issue those visas. Or perhaps our mission should have arranged, that those visas will be issued at the border crossing. But given the way the issue, has turned out, Egypt should have understood, that this is a very precarious situation, and that under this refoulement principle, people should be allowed, to cross borders once they are running from a war situation. So I wouldn't really blame the Nigerian government in this circumstance, because the window was too short, to make all these full arrangements. That's the way, one can really look at it.
Now, I mean, as a former career diplomat yourself, if you were in the loop on advising the Nigerian government, what would you be asking them to do now? And what do you think even may have gone wrong that the bus drivers or bus owners would refuse to move on, having been paid?
Well, one can only hazard a guess at this point in time, since we're not privy, to what went on within government circles. But I want to believe, probably the money that was wired from Nigeria didn't arrive there on time, and the mission was prevailed upon, to find a way, to gather whatever resources it could. And given the dire situation most missions are in now, it was not possible for Egypt, for a mission in Egypt, to even have that kind of funds available. Maybe the idea of now paying a portion of fees to the bus came up, and the arrangement was that giving a to pay the bus, probably possible because the money still hadn't come in at that point in time, and that was why the drivers most of they did. It's a kind of soft blackmail, but then you won't blame them because it was a difficult journey for them too. The danger they were in, the high insurance cost, they would pay going into that war situation. So all this, would have created tension within them. But I'm happy, that the Nigerian government has been able to sort that one out. And hopefully by tomorrow, they'll be able to sort out this visa issue and get our people, to move to the airport and start coming back. I do hope, too, that there are enough planes, to check them, because given the number, we are hearing, I doubt if we have enough planes, to take them at a go. And given the long time they've been on the road, to remain at the airport again for 2-3 days, will be very, very difficult for them to deal.
Ambassador Isoh, quickly here, this also points to the fact that, speaking of which, the African Union free movement across the AU countries, if you recall, this year, January, will mark 5 years since the AU spoke about having the free movement of persons protocol, which was signed by the African Union. And look, it seems now that we're having this problem, this should be brought back to the fore. African countries telling the world they're together, but not together after all.
Well, you're very correct on this. It's one of the reasons why, international trade, is going very well between African countries. There's always that reticence, to pull through, whatever agreement they have in place. There's always that suspicion of what other nationals are coming to do, in their territory. So I think it's time, another meeting was held to see how they can get this protocol, to be accepted by every country. And in situations like this, it doesn't speak well of any country that tries to stop refugees, from crossing or even coming in to stay. I agree with you that it's time the AU really did something serious about protocols, it gets into with African countries.
Speaking of mutual suspicion of, fellow African countries, how careful should Nigeria be about those that may infiltrate the ranks of those that are being brought home? Because one of the reasons we hear that the Egyptians are not too open to the idea of, Nigerians crossing their country is security concerns. How concerned should we be, and what extra measures should we be taking?
Well, I want to believe, government would have put measures in place. As people come in, you must have your passport to start with. And then there will be some questions that will be asked the returnees. Those who are students, coming in. Those who are not students, you have residence permit and all that. Then that will make it easy, for government to know those who are genuinely Nigerian students or citizens coming back home, who don't have any kind of criminal baggage around them to worry about. But I think government, certainly should have in place, measures, to check all these, as the people come in. Because it's not unlikely, that some criminal elements, might take advantage of what is happening and try to slip into the country.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Ambassador Frank Isoh, career diplomat, joining us tonight on Newsnight.